Hey, lighten up, jerk!
So anyways, so go ahead.
Jews are complicated people. That's why we have a Jewish joke, which many people, my friend Robert, has heard many times. We say when you get two Jews together, you have three opinions. Okay. That's a well self-effacing joke that we love and we say it all the time. And it goes back to that, Jewish scholars, rabbis specifically, but any Jewish scholar, and I like to consider myself one because we like to be scholarly and teach our children the traditions as well as the faith. Those arguments, we call them debates, but they're real arguments, and there is a Hebrew word called, the word is machloket, and it means something to the effect of disagreement or debate. Mm-hmm. Okay, that word is like this holy word, in a joking sense. That this is what Judaism is all about. Okay, it doesn't matter, if one thing is completely agreed upon and has been for 2,000 years, it's still argued. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's argued especially, segueing back into the denominations, all those interpretations, the entire Hebrew Bible, which again is the Old Testament, is very hotly debated, the interpretations of said work, by the different denominations. So again, going back to just, what I'm familiar with, Ashkenazi Judaism, the Eastern European roots and descendants, you have, as Robert said, the three main groups. Orthodox, is the most religious, conservative is in the middle, and then Reform is the least religious of those three. Okay, and each of those has its, sub-varieties and subdivisions. Orthodoxy especially is is probably the widest range of observance levels just within, everything that kind of gets lumped into Orthodox Jews. Those are the ones who you see that they look, telltale Jewish. They often have what's called the payas, which means the side curls, and again, that's from a specific line in the Old Testament that says a man should not shave the four corners of his beard, is the specific line. Sorry, the four corners of his face. Okay, and where or what are the four corners of their face? It's been interpreted through the Talmud throughout the centuries and millennia as meaning your sideburns are two of the corners, and these two parts of kind of corners of your beard are the other two corners. Could it have been the corners of your mustache? Sure, but that's not how it was interpreted. Right. So even though more Orthodox religious Jews will, they'll shave, but they'll shave their mustache, they often will not trim their beard either ever, or at least parts of their beard they won't trim ever, as well as they won't ever cut their sideburns from their entire life.
So it's kind of like the Amish and their observance of growing beards, but you don't
because that's a sign of marriage. I think it's
right,
like that.
Also,
yeah.
but then
it's very different.
And they
from
obviously do
this
trim their
race.
beards because they have those kind of telltale signature beards, but they're not the same as the Jewish beards that can get to your belt by the time you're old.
But then you also don't think of them as having mustaches either. So
That's right. They clearly shave their mustaches. So if that is from that interpretation, I should say that same line of the Old Testament, which it might be, that'd be something that'd be worth looking up. They obviously interpret it in a similar, although not the same way, but clearly those four corners are not including your mustache.
Yeah.
Now,
and for them, they're not including their sideburns either, though, because they don't keep their sideburns.
Now, and I may be wrong, like with the Orthodox denomination, don't they also tie scripture onto their body as well?
Believe it or not, so do we. So, and
okay.
You've never seen me do this, and I wish I had brought in a set, and my set of what we call tefillin, and I dislike the English word of that. I'm just going to call it tefillin. The English word is from Greek. They call it phylacteries. Okay?
Yeah.
And whenever I see that, and I only heard that word for the first time in high school.
It does sound rather suggestive.
Yeah. It sounds suggestive, and it also sounds completely confusing. What the hell is a phylactery?
Right.
Okay? And
Sounds like they misspelled factory.
it does, right.
Or
and,
it's-
Or something else.
Yeah.
and I guess it exactly. And I guess it refers to a leather band or a leather something because it is traditionally leather.
Right.
It has to be if you're being going by the law of, again, the Old Testament and the Talmud. The Talmud is the interpretation of, again, a line in the Old Testament that says, you shall bind them, and the them, again, as I said, is referring to the commandments. Yep, so Scripture itself. Okay, the actual words is what is interpreted as. You shall bind them around your arm and between your eyes. Okay, around your forehead, meaning.
Okay.
Between
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so like headband.
It's
It's,
exactly a
it's
headband.
like kind of like it looks somewhat like
Yep.
a headband with like a little box.
The between your, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
Okay, it's there's two parts of a set, and the one is a long piece that's just one long piece of leather with the box, and that little box has similar inside. It's just a little scroll, little mini scroll of scripture. Okay, it can be specific things, but it doesn't have to be a specific thing. It's similar to, for those of you who've seen a mezuzah, which is that little approximately 4 or 6 inch long piece of metal or wood that Jews will nail to their doorpost.
Oh yeah.
Believe it or not, the mezuzah,
my,
the tefillin, okay, the leather straps, and what I mentioned before, the line of teach them to your children, that's all the same paragraph. That's why it's considered such a holy paragraph, and because it's after the 6-word verse of the affirmation of the Jewish faith. This is all this one paragraph in Deuteronomy, and why I haven't specifically told you the verses of Deuteronomy where it's from is another thing I want to get into in a few
Okay,
minutes.
yeah.
Is that unlike, I would say, religious Christians and even some non-religious Christians, some scholarly Christians, they have memorized parts of their Bible and memorized the actual chapter and the verse of the book where it comes from.
You guys don't have that.
Jews, not that we don't have that, but we don't do that in general. Even rabbis usually don't memorize the actual verse, chapter and verse of a specific line. We memorize it in a different way, the portion, and again, this is just Torah for now, just the 5 books of Moses, in other words, the Pentateuch. Okay, so for the Torah, we actually, about 1,000 years ago, split it, and I'll get back into this because this is fascinating, into 54 portions. Okay, so those are 5 books, so each of those 5 books has approximately 11 portions. Okay, either 10, 11, or 12 to get to 54. Okay, some of those splits are natural splits, as in the end of one story and the beginning of another, and I bet you if I laid down a copy of the Torah or the Pentateuch for you guys, you would be able to guess on at least half of those splits correctly. And again, these splits were made, give or take, around 1,000 years ago. Okay, at the same time that the, what we call trope, the musical notation for chanting the Torah was created, as
Yeah.
well as Hebrew vowels.
It's very
were
musical.
created. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And it's a set of music. Because when you read the Torah, which we do every Sabbath, as well as if you're religious, 2 other times a week on Mondays and Thursdays, but for almost all Jews, every Sabbath, so at least once a week. We don't actually read it, not traditionally. We traditionally chant it. Then we study it too. We study
Right.
what we're chanting.
It's because I went
Yep.
and observed that it's actually very beautiful.
It is. It is, and it comes from the tradition in the Middle Ages of chanting it for those who could not read biblically Hebrew in the marketplace, in the bazaars of the Middle Ages in the Middle East. Okay,